So, as the last votes are being counted in South Africa's 6th democratic election, observer missions from both home and abroad have given their opinions on the process. The South African development community expressing concern over a poor youth turnout at polling stations, while the Association for Free Research and International Cooperation described the process as highly professional. Observers keep an eye on the voting process, counting of the votes and determination and declaration of the results. Joining us now in studio is Sello Hatang, CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, which was also an observer mission in the elections. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us tonight.
Thank you very much for this opportunity.
You look rather tired yourself, so hard work, I can imagine, for all of the observer missions and all those covering the elections. Let's first start with, do you feel that we are at a point in the election where we can say the end is nigh? And I say this given the developments at the Results Operations Center. We hear of legal challenges possibly being mounted. What are your thoughts?
Well, I hope that they do actually take the necessary action instead of just complaining without using the instruments that are there for people to then know that for sure the independent arbiters can then arbitrate the matter and say whether the complaints by those who are complaining do have any basis or not. And I think it's important that we not just scream at these things, but rather engage ourselves in either a dialogue, or if that fails, we then go out and use the instruments such as the courts.
Okay.
So
locate ourselves within the legal frameworks of the electoral system, but also the IEC itself. Precisely,
and so if we were to do anything right, is to make sure that we don't just call into question the whole process over things that we consider definitely as observers as issues that can be that are not that big to call into.
Perhaps that's where I should start. Do you think, and obviously every concern is worthwhile looking into.
Precisely, yeah.
But is it being blown out of proportion by some?
You know, I wouldn't say that it's blown out of proportion. I'd say that, and I said it earlier on, that the IEC should not ignore any complaint, because every South African's vote matters. However, judging by the number of some of these concerns that were raised, you can't then call into question the whole thing.
The entirety of
the process too, and then you call into its integrity is then questioned. One of the people at the center at Rock said to me, "Well, you must be wrong, Hatang, because these can't be declared free and fair when you have so many small parties," not my wording, so many small parties that are complaining about these things. Free and fair does not denote that there were no problems. So you would know, having gone through the continent for some of the elections and the previous elections, there would be problems such as stationery, which we observed, such as the scanners that would run out of the roll or not working. And then it delays the process.
Delayed opening of polling stations.
In a couple of occasions you had, or one or two at least, you had the station not opening at all. So those are things that you can then say, these are some of the problems. However, they should not then call into question the whole process. Mm-hmm. Hence, as the Nelson Mandela Foundation, and we are joined in this by the other legacy foundations, who also declared that the elections were free and fair. Indeed.
So you believe them to be largely free and fair at this point?
Precisely. Mm-hmm. Look, the point is, for every complaint that's raised, you have to have evidence. What's your proof that there was someone who was denied their right to vote? There's one of the people again today at the Rock who again challenged me and said, "No, look, you are wrong, because I expected so many people to vote for me in this place." And of course, you can only feel sorry for those people, because a promised vote is different from the one that's delivered.
Than actual vote.
Precisely, because you can address 15,000 people and each one of them is cheering very loudly. It does not necessarily amount to or result to a vote.
I'm glad you raised the issue of the continental standards of elections. The ASA head of mission, former President Goodluck Jonathan, was saying that he believes that Africa as a region has done very well improving in how it's fielded elections and the outcome of those elections. Obviously, we're talking also about the processes and the systems itself. But do you think that there's a sense that when people look at African countries and their elections, that there's an expectation that they've got to be 100% correct, 100% credible, so to speak? But does anybody have elections that are 100% credible?
You know, the example that I think it was His Excellency Jonathan who raised this actually and said, even if you introduce technology, first world countries have the best technologies yet. The people are still going through some inquiry about interference by other nations on their elections. And I think the bar tends to be set unfairly too high, to say, no, because you are the continent that's known for undemocratic processes, and these are not my words necessarily.
For despots and
wars,
and yes.
Precisely. Therefore, you should then have the bar raised so high. And we expect the IEC to live up to that bar, by the way, because we are a country that has gone through a process of where mediocrity was celebrated over excellence. And we don't want to continue on that. And the IEC has never let us down in terms of that. And we are hoping that they won't in the future.
It's very interesting that you make the point, because it's been also observed, so to speak, that South Africa has had minimal observer missions because of it being a mature democracy that has largely ran very successful elections. But let's look at the past elections. I mean, I know, speaking to some of the observers as well, some of the people who've taken part, including the political parties, they said none of these elections were 100% perfect. Why is there this sense that because of the heightened tensions going into this elections that there is something seriously wrong with the system, or that there is so much at stake that people are willing to be reckless?
I think there's a few things at play, and not being a political analyst, I don't want to sound like one, because I'm not. I'm just a bureaucrat. So for me, the big thing here is you had the sheer number of political parties that joined this year, each one of them expecting a big share of these votes. There had to be room for disappointment, and big disappointment for that matter, including those who declared themselves presidents ahead of the elections.
But isn't that part of electioneering, though?
Precisely, and when you then don't get those votes, you then don't take the vuvuzela and blow it on rooftops and say, no, I was cheated of votes, even though you can't prove how you were cheated of those votes. And I think that's the thing that we have to just deal with. And for example, with some of the political parties, when the question was asked about whether they had their own party observers who were in the
party agents, yes, inside the polling stations.
So you didn't even have that at places where you were confident to have huge numbers.
So are you saying that there are parties that didn't ensure that they had party agents within the polling stations?
Well, there are cases like those who were then asked. So if you are saying you expected 1,000, 2,000, 10,000, I think all of them are talking about millions though. So you're expecting 1 million votes out of this district. Why didn't you then post some of those people that were going to vote for you into the so that
because
they
surely
can
you'd
observe.
have to be part of the counting process to validate, verify the results that are posted outside.
I can tell you that at the voting district where I was observing the elections, we only had 4 party agents.
So tell us a little bit more about that experience as an observer. What were your findings, and which polling station was this? Did it open on time?
So it opened on time. This was in the West Rand. It opened on time. It had staff who were very, very efficient in terms of what they needed to do, but also the care that was given to old people, frail people, that could then be taken forward for them to vote. All that was then dealt with. Where problems erupted, it was around stationery. We ran out of stationery, and as a result, you then had people having to wait, and those who were supposed to deliver the stationery not coming on time. And of course, the scanner was another one, because they had 1 scanner per voting station, and you with 1 scanner, anything happens to that scanner, you have to wait for the roll to be brought. For example, I think with our station it took about an hour, if not 2, for the roll to then be brought to the station. So I think all those things made people irritable, understandably, the voters who are now irritable. However, the professionalism of the IEC officials cannot also be overlooked.
But when people judge the elections of freeness and fairness, those are some of the things, especially when it comes to freeness. That's what they should be judging it on. If I'm unable, for instance, to stick around, are you not inhibiting my right to express myself through the poll? When there are not enough ballot papers, when the indelible ink is not so indelible. These are the process and procedures that people are questioning in terms of the credibility, and surely you can see why as an observer.
But those are things that have happened in the past too, where you've run out of stationery and people would be impatient. And I think the biggest measure of this kind of thing is 1994. You remember those?
Yes, that there was a legal challenge.
A lot of challenges, yet they were free and fair. And I think even in this instance, those kind of challenges are not ones where, if, for example, we were talking about 40–50% of the voting stations not opening at all, that's a crisis for an electorate, because it's about the pervasiveness of the pervasiveness.
I want to look at the response of the IEC when these issues were raised. They raised Section 24A, the amendments that had to be made to the Electoral Act, saying that they were rather reluctant because they could foresee the disruptions that this would cause to their distribution, to their logistics. So the large numbers that they were not prepared for in certain polling stations were as a result of this. Is that a good enough reason? Or should South Africans, and I'm talking about the parties and the citizenry, because they're represented in Parliament, take more responsibility for the fact that we are in the situation that we're in, because they pushed for those amendments?
I think those are things that post-elections we need to be looking into, to say, was the IEC adequately prepared for those amendments? And with those amendments, what kind of burden did it put on the system, for the system to work? Should we have postponed some of the implementation of those amendments so that it then comes into effect, like they did with political party funding, for example, where those were things that could then be deferred until the next election so that the IEC could then prepare? That's a valid reason for the IEC, which the IEC has put forward. However, I go back to the fact that even though you raise these as concerns, you must still then not post prior to. You should have warned people to say, hey, something might go wrong here, something might break if we do not do this.
Just a quick final question. What do you think are the prospects of success for these smaller parties in challenging the results of the elections?
I wish them all the best.
Does the legal framework provide, though, for an objection of the results at this point?
Then, well, you have to always present evidence. You know how the law works. Show me evidence, show me proof that something was done to to your disadvantage, then it can be taken forward. So I wish them all the best, but to the next administration, we can only say that all of them should then take this as another mandate to say, serve the people, not self.
Thank you very much, Sello Hatang, CEO of the Nelson Mandela Foundation, part of the legacy foundations that were observing the elections, 2019 elections. So let's find out what's happening at